Today, I have a guest with me who I have followed, admired, and indeed spent lots of time with over the years. She is Chupi Sweetman. She is founder of her eponymous fine jewellery brand, one of Ireland's most loved jewellery brands. And she is also mother to Aya and daughter of Rosita Sweetman, one of the founders of the Irish Women's Liberation Movement. I am thrilled to have her here with us today. The Motherload is powered by Peugeot and sponsored by Evoca, It's for Women, and Liffey Valley. Chupi, welcome to the Motherload.
Thank you so much for having me, my darling.
It's so nice to have you here. You were one of the first people that I wanted to have on the podcast from its inception like 2 years ago. So I'm really glad to have you here.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Does that say I'm surviving motherhood or barely surviving motherhood?
Well, you tell me. You tell me.
Depends on the day. I think it depends on the day, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of question, isn't it? Aya is what age now?
She is 4.5.
Okay. Wow. She's older than I thought
I made the mistake. She was really sick. She'd RSV just before Christmas, and I was ringing the doctor the out of hours and, really stressed. It was in the middle of our busiest week of the world. It's Christmas time where all the engagements and diamonds and moments being marked. And Aya is incredibly sick, and Brian is doing an amazing job holding the fort. And it's gotten to kind of 9 o'clock, and we're both like, okay, this is not good. The temperature hasn't gone down. Is she okay? And I ring the kind of out of hours doctor, and I'm like, hi, and my little girl is 4. And from her deathbed, she basically rears up and goes, I am 4.5. And I feel that really, really personifies the age she is in, which is just personhood. She's just the most finding herself. It's gorgeous. She was fine, and it turns out and is 4.5 and is thriving.
That's good. And she was okay. The RSV was awful that went around at Christmas time.
No crack. Wouldn't recommend it. Yeah, 0 out of 10. But that's kind of the roller coaster of, isn't it? The highs and the lows of parenthood, of motherhood.
Yeah, and they always get sick right at those key weeks.
Oh, couldn't have been any other. No, and Brian was amazing. I think, if I have to look at motherhood, so we were 25 years together this week. My husband and I know, but I'm not surrendering because we're only married 11 years. So I keep the original because I was like, we were babies when we met. And that journey into parenthood together and the intensity of it and the magic of it.
Yeah. God, 25 years is quite an accomplishment though.
It's wild. I'm 41, so 16.
Wow.
We were babies.
Wow. A lot changed.
If she brings someone home at 16, I'm going to evict them from my house. I'm going to be like, get out of my house, leave my daughter alone. But bless our parents, they made it work.
Yeah. So you're running a really big business, a really successful, really busy business, and you have a 4.5-year-old. So what does the day-to-day look like for you? We talk about balance, which is...
I don't believe in balance. I don't know if it exists. Yeah. I think it's a tough one. I think balance is this fiction that Brian and I always say we need a wife. Honestly, if we could have anything in the whole world, just a wife who ran the domestics, because Brian also has a really busy, so Chupi is gorgeous. She's my first baby, and a roller coaster, scaling a business, and especially one with a heart, is tough, and it's tough on everyone involved, and it's tough on all of us. And I started Chupi when I was in my mid-20s, like 26, 27, so a baby. And then Brian works in the business as well and has his own consultancy. So balance. What does we don't really have a normal day. So what does a normal day look like? We both made a really conscious decision because we had a really long road to Aya. You and I have talked about that before. We were 4.5 years having her, and it meant that having her was really intentional, and we're only going to get her, and it's one of the greatest privileges to get to be mom. And so I honor that part of my life, but I also really want to work. And it's so different for all of us. We all fill our own cups in different ways. And so I try and balance it. So we rarely have a typical day, although there's weeks when, get up in the morning, do the school run, the 3 of us, and the dogs. Sorry, we're a 5-person family. If you're just,
of course.
I definitely counts the dogs. Do the school run and then I work on Clarendon Street. We've our offices in town, and work my day and go home. And there's days like that which are gorgeous.
Yeah. And that's the thing, we talk about balance so often, and I totally agree with you. I don't think it exists. It's just what you said there, what fills up your cup on any given day. And it might be 80% of one thing and 20% of another on one day, and it might be in complete opposite direction on another day.
And I love the idea of glass and plastic. So there are some things in your life that are glass that you cannot drop, and some things that are plastic. And it's knowing, so today, for example, I'm going to be working, I'll be in work until kind of 10 or 11. It's just the way my calls have stacked up. I'll miss bedtime, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I know that's like bedtime is not glass, but knowing, the school play, the moments. She and I have a date every week. So if a mom and I a date and we go and we do something, I'm going to do it with her tomorrow. I'll finish work a little early. We'll go for pizza. She'll tell me all about her day. We'll play a lot of Slovenian families. And that idea of, I think it's funny that we KPI our businesses and our careers, and we have goals, and this is what I'm going to do and this is what it's going to look like. But we never make that space in our homes.
Yeah.
So I know it's ridiculous, and I always get teased about it. But I have a in my calendar, I have once a week date with Aya, once a week date with my mom.
Ridiculous at all.
And it's Brian and I went date. Poor Brian gets every 2 weeks. He does worse in the situation, but he's okay. We're in the survival era, and so it's making. I make space and try and make space in my life. Doesn't mean I always do it, but trying to honor the time for her as much as the time for me.
Yeah. And I love that, Sarah. I live by my iCal. If it's not in my iCal, it doesn't happen. So I totally understand.
How do people function who don't have, every hour of my day is like, cool, this here, this there, this is what I'm doing. And I have to. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah. And it's lovely then to fit in your family like that, because that's how you're going to make it work.
I think it's recognizing that balance doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right? That you've got to make it. You have to intentionally. I always think, so I struggle with manifesting. I think there's a lot of privilege in the idea of manifesting, of this idea no one is manifesting their way out of Gaza. And you can't, manifesting comes from a place of, first of all, passport privilege, the country you live in, the environment you grow up in, the economic situation you grow up in, recognizing how much privilege we carry to sit in these rooms. But I think there's something amazing about the idea that manifesting is dreaming. And I always think you need a dream and a plan. So you've got to know what the future feels like. You've got to be able to imagine it. You've got to be able to understand all of those tangible things. But you need to build a plan that's going to get you there.
Absolutely. A dream and a plan.
A dream and a plan. So I did it. I did my first one back in 2014. This amazing woman, Joanne Hessian, who I sit on a board you can't afford. So it's basically like your girl gang, but with numbers. And so we meet, we try and meet once a quarter. Realistically, we probably meet once a year. And we plan out our, what's your big challenge of 2025? What's your big opportunity of 2025?
Yeah.
So Sonia Lennon's on it, Catherine Roney from Head of Business in AIB, these amazing women. And we're now across our 40s, 50s and 60s.
Amazing. And
it's such an amazing thing. But I did my first one with them back in 2014. I imagined my life in 2017. And, I remember you've got to do a day in your life. And you do imagine walking out of your house. What does your house look like? Is it in the city? Is it in the country? Who's in your house? Is it filled with people? Do you have 12 kids and 22 dogs? Is it no one but you in your blissful New York loft? And then imagine going to work. What does work look like? Are you going to a big office? Are you going to a small team? And I basically imagined my life 2014 to 2017 down to I was going to have an office with exposed brick walls and wood floors. And this was, we were babies. Chupi was maybe turning over a couple of £100,000 a year.
Sorry, only a couple of hundred.
And I always jewellery businesses are different because it's so expensive what we do to make.
I
So
know,
it always sounds amazing. We didn't make any money. I was still getting paid. I didn't get paid a salary until 2017. I remember my first salary.
Wow.
And it was £2,000 a month. And I remember feeling rich because it was the first time my business could pay me. That was partly because in 2014, I imagined this life in 2017. So we were going to be in a red brick house with steps up to it. I was going to walk to work. Work was going to have exposed brick walls. We were going to have about 20 people on the team. We were going to be exporting all over the world. And I built that life because I dreamed it. And I, like you would say, manifested it. But I had a plan. I had a dream. And then I built a spreadsheet. So I love a spreadsheet. I built it okay, what does if that's what 2017 looks like, what does 2016 look like? What does 2015 look like? And then what am I doing in 2014 that will take me each month, each quarter, each year on the way?
That's powerful stuff.
And I tell this story not to be like, aren't I great? Because it all came true. Everything on my list came true. But when I sat in 2017, I realized I'd forgotten a few crucial things. First of all, I'd forgotten to remember to get myself paid. So I literally sat open 2017. The business had a phenomenal 3 years. I wasn't paid a salary. I took out about 20 grand a year. And I would take it out at the end of the year once everyone else was paid. Every single thing in the business was paid except me. I was working probably 70, 80 hours a week. And I took my 20 grand. And so 2017, I woke up and went, shit, we need to buy a house. I need to protect us as a family. I need to make sure. And I hadn't dreamed of a baby. And so I woke up in 2017 going, okay, cool, we'll have a baby this year. And I was thinking the irony, because we met so young, our families spent the first 10 years being like, don't get married, don't get pregnant, don't get married, don't get pregnant. And then the subsequent 10 years from 26 onwards going, have you thought about marriage? Possibly babies? Have you considered it? And so waking up in 2017 and being like, oh Lord, what was I? I was 32, 33. Being like, oh, actually, I built the life I dreamt of, but I actually didn't sense check it and make sure it was a life that would serve me.
Did you go and do a new vision board?
I do it every 3 years.
Do you?
Yeah, every 3 years. So now COVID threw a bit of a and I had during COVID in 2020. So that threw a little bit. Where am I now? I did my last one in 24. So I did 24, 25. So I'll be delivering it 1st of Jan 27.
Delivering it.
Yeah. This is like I have objectives and to know what. I think it's such a danger to make sure you're building a life you actually want to live.
Absolutely, to be intentional.
Yeah.
Intentional.
And recognizing that like my goals in 2017 went from, starting the year, okay, have a baby, and then 3-year plan, I'm going to have a baby this year, and then we'll decide whether we want a second, and probably happen in 2020 at that stage, to being, go to the hospital and get tests. And that pivot, understanding, what do they say? It's stay relentless on your goal, but you've got to accept the journey.
Yeah, it's that thing, and I often think of this about life. It's when to know to hold on and when to know to surrender and let go. And it's always a combination.
And what are you holding on to?
Yeah.
What's the thing because we realized after that first really horrible year that it wasn't about having a perfect baby. It was about welcoming children into the world. And so that I always talk about this ring, which you guys can't see if you're tuned into us, but I made a ring with 5 diamonds for myself with the idea that within 5 years we'd start a family. And so I couldn't control would we have a baby because that was so far out of my control, but I could control that within 5 years we would follow the path, whether IVF eventually worked, whether we fostered, whether we adopted, we were going to welcome children into our lives. And it was 4.5 years.
Wow.
So I have one ring for the day we started, Crown of Hope, and I have one for the day she was born. And I always think because they are the worst and best days of my life. And it's a funny one to commemorate, one of the worst days of your life. But it's about just honoring that was a moment that happened to us. And it could have taken us on a load of different journeys. It took us on a really complicated one. And it was so hard, but we hold her in our arms now. So different.
You did IVF?
We did.
Yeah. And how was that for you? How did you cope with the uncertainty of it?
Miserable.
Awful.
As a control freak, like as a class A, as someone who likes to plan all of the things and know everything, it was horrific. And I think I was so naive going in. I thought you did IVF and got a baby. I didn't realize that. So the data, obviously I'm a huge data nerd, you know that. So within the first 6 months, 85% of people are pregnant who are trying to get pregnant. 85% within the first 6 months. Of the remaining 15%, the odds are just horrendous. They're just, they're the odds you don't look at and they're the stories you don't hear.
I know.
It's all the people who didn't work. So we went in and I think what I wasn't prepared for is not only the uncertainty, but the financial, emotional and physical roller coaster. Yeah, that it's so multifaceted. And I also think I found it very frustrating because Chupi at that point was flying. She was really, out there and living and breathing. And that was, 17, 18, 19, 20. And dealing with the world's expectations of being, I just took to saying I don't like children because a journalist said to me, and you're just so into your career, you're not having babies. And we were probably in the middle of a loss at that stage. And I just remember being like, oh my God. I was like, oh yeah, I just don't like children.
But people have no idea the language to use, the experiences that other people are going through. They really have no idea. It's unbelievable.
It's like all grief though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unless you've been through it or you've watched someone go through it, it's hard.
Yeah, you can't understand.
We'd friends who'd been through it and I think I thought at the time I'd been really empathetic and understanding. But yeah, it's just that. But it's a woman, right? Like we're talking about motherload, about the journey, about expectations and years.
Yeah.
20, find a nice boy, settle down. 25, get the proper career. 30, you've not married yet. What are you doing? And by 35, if you haven't had your babies, you may as well be dead. And then after 40, you're dead anyway. So why does it matter? And it is, but we have these benchmarks. And yeah, men have them to a certain degree, but not at the same level.
Not
at the same expectations.
Yeah. And how did you feel then when you did become pregnant with Aya? I mean, obviously it was full of, I would imagine, worry at first.
It was a roller coaster of joy and fear. And then we went into COVID. So I wouldn't recommend having a high risk pregnancy in the middle of a giant pandemic. But by and large, joy, I think, and the privilege of it. I guess I've always been, I think I've lived a life in two worlds in a way, in that, so my family, my mum comes from, there was incredible wealth, absolutely nothing by the time I got to her generation, and absolutely nothing by the time I got to mine. And my parents divorced. My dad was not a great human being. And so mum brought us up on what was called deserted wives allowance. Imagine, not single parents, not deserted wives. And if you think about that, my mum is obviously one of the founders of the women's movement, a very fearsome woman. And I had grown up with this idea of huge privilege. Mum managed to keep hold of our home. So I grew up in a very gorgeous house in a beautiful part of the world in Wicklow, but with absolutely nothing. And so I think, but with the awareness that I had huge privilege, mum did an incredible job, even though I remember, there being no money. Absolutely no money, being very aware quite young there was no money, but being aware that it would be okay. So I think having Aya, being pregnant, I knew that, it was high risk. It was all the things. We were in a pandemic, but I knew it was going to be okay.
Yeah. And did it change the way you viewed, like you already were running your business and then you became a mother. Did it change the way you viewed leadership, the way you viewed your career, your ambition? Did everything shift after Aya?
No.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great answer.
I know lots of people say, yeah, it completely changed. No, I love my job. I've got one of the best jobs in the world. You get to mark the biggest moments in people's lives, the day they fall in love, the day they get married, the day they welcome their babies into the world, but also the days of heartbreak. For every person who walks through the door who is in love, there's someone else walking in who's had their heart broken. Whether they're getting divorced, whether everything they'd imagined hasn't worked out. There's, for every baby welcomed into the world, we hear the stories of the ones who haven't made it or the ones who are longed for. And you just get this privilege of getting to be, my journey into jewelry started, Brian proposed to him after we were together 2 weeks. So honestly, 2 weeks in, he was like, he told me he loved me.
When you were 16.
16. And he was like, I'm going to marry you one day. And I was like, my dad was he on his fourth marriage at that stage?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, so that, it was like, there's been more. I've got an amazing eclectic family all over the world, which I'm really grateful for. But I was not brought up with the idea. I was to feel like class traitor as well. My mother is a founder of the women's movement. I'm not like, I was never the white dress and the baby's girl. I was like, okay, we're going to change the world. And the idea of getting married was ridiculous. But he persisted. So he proposed. He didn't say, let's get married right now. But he was like, I'm going to marry you one day. And he kept at it. And eventually, 10 years later, I think I've told this story a lot, but 10 years later, we were out in Dunleary for a walk, and we'd lost a really dear friend the year before. We were so privileged. We were so young. It just never occurred to us that it wasn't going to be okay. And it was one of those ones, I think, grief at that age where you just expect health and wellness. And for me, it made both of us really think that marriage has a point, because weddings, the magic of having your people in one room, of getting to say, this is us and this is it, and we are choosing forever. And it took, I'd been very cynical, spent the last till 25 being like, what is the point? And then knowing, okay, there's a point. And we were out in Dunleary one day, and I said to Brian, I was like, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready. Let's get married. And he said, nah.
Like, it's been 10 years of you trying for this. What's happened?
I was outraged. I was like, I'm sorry, what? This is me not wanting to get married to you. It's feminism. You not wanting to marry me. It's rude. Just rude.
Yeah.
And it turned out he bought the ring.
Oh.
So he'd had the ring, and
So you're going to ruin it.
So I was going to ruin it. And I'm really hard to surprise. I am just impossible to surprise. And he'd had the ring, and he'd had the whole plan, and only person he told was his baby sister. And he'd everything planned. And me suddenly being like, yeah, I actually think maybe we should get married was basically going to completely ruin it. And so we had this whopper argument. And we're calling my best friend afterwards, being like, what? Like, it's how? And she's known me, we've known each other for babies. She knows him really well. Conveniently, she married one of Brian's best friends. So I thoroughly recommend it. Basically, our besties married each other and live 15 minutes away. And our little kids are besties. Going away with them next week. I love them. I don't know what happens if any of us divorce. Well, it'll be very complicated. There'll be a fight to the death over who gets who. But anyway, we went away. We were out went down to Montpellier, South France. Gorgeous. And he spent the whole day trying to get me to go to the botanic gardens. And so I'm a total garden. I'm like, take me to the wilderness. I love the wilds, to the mountains. He is not. He is suburban, urban. He's a professional nerd.
Smell a rat.
No, I didn't. I was like, what's wrong with you? What is going on? Anyway, eventually gets me out of the house to dinner, which is my other key weakness, eating. So he gets me out of the house and he proposes magic like fountains at midnight in the south of France and a wine festival, having fed me a really good meal. So he knew all of my, and I've told this, I just remember this intensity of wearing my engagement ring and thinking, it's a piece of the future. It's like, jewelry is like nothing else in the world. You pass it on for generations. You give it to your daughters and sons and they make future heirlooms out of it. And then you give it to the people in your life. And I just thought, I knew because I'd been scouted very young. I'd gone out of first year in uni into Topshop, who at that time were cool.
I remember. Oh, listen.
They were once cool.
They were super cool.
They were super cool.
Yeah.
And I'd been so young leaving college that it meant that I always knew I wasn't going to work in fashion for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And I realized I was going to do this for the rest of my life. So did having Aya change my attitude? No, because I put on that ring and I knew, I remember just looking at it in the days afterwards and I knew one day my daughter would wear it. Mm. It was 10 years from that day until I met my daughter. I was 26 when we got engaged and 36 when I had her. But I knew she was going to wear it one day. And it doesn't mean she ever has to work in jewelry or anything, but so having her, did it change my anything? No, it made me grateful that mum and her friends had fought for us to have the rights to choose a life.
Was it a Chupi ring that he proposed to you?
No. No, he started I'd always loved jewelry. I've always loved it. He is really good at buying jewelry. He was actually devastated because when we started Chupi, because he was like, he was like, what am I going to buy you now? Because he's really good at buying jewelry. I always reminded him he can just buy me diamonds. And he chooses beautiful bits. No, it was gorgeous. It was recycled gold. It was a grey diamond. That started my grey diamond love affair. Yeah. Handmade by a girl in New York. He'd found her on Etsy. And it was magical.
Well done, Brian.
Well done, Brian. And even things, he didn't have a tacky ring box because it wasn't a nice ring box. So he just put it into a shirt pocket.
Oh, gorgeous. Just very classy.
Just very, it was amazing. But gifting is his love language.
Okay.
So it was
You're lucky.
It's now acts of service. He is 10 out of 10 in the bins, but he's really good. So the other day he booked a meeting with me 2 weeks ago on a Friday afternoon and we worked together. So that's totally normal. He booked in, he needed a 2-hour session on advertising. And I was like, okay, great. It's in my calendar. And I woke up in the morning and Aya was packing her suitcase to go to Granny's. Okay, this is a bit strange. And we are total COVID parents. Like we are the classic, never letting our babies out of our sight. We worship the ground she works on. She comes to us with everything with us. And he had booked a surprise weekend away in K Club. Oh. And just, so we got into the car, abandoned our child with her grandparents and went away and just had 24 glorious hours. And we've only done it a couple of times since she was born. So he's really good. And it was all, he had organised everything behind my back, which is impossible. Wow. Because I'm like, and what's happening on the 26th of September, 2027? Cool. Okay, that's in my calendar. But it was, yeah.
Rory, if you're listening.
Men of Ireland. I'm always saying it's the unexpected moments. It's not the flowers on Mother, because it was Mother's Day. And he just said, you need a break. You need 24 hours not being mom. And I always think, it always makes me laugh. I'm like, it's funny, right? The balance, you fight so hard for them. You adore them. You worship the ground they walk on. But 24 hours away from them is the best gift in the entire world.
Absolutely. It is so important.
It's balance.
Yeah.
But I always think it's the unexpected moments. Right?
Yeah, that's where the magic is.
Yeah. It's the Monday night glass of wine.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Might have one of those tonight.
Yeah. It is. And it's just like it's going out for dinner on a Monday night when it's not part of your routine, and that, you've all seen that. I think we're so in it. I've got gorgeous generational perspective because my mum lives with us.
I know.
So it's magic. So we, obviously Aya was very longed for. and I was pregnant Christmas 19. And mum had said she was going to buy a house near us. She was like, well, it's silly. She had home in Wicklow. She was living near enough by. And she was like, well, why don't I just live near you guys? And I can help you with Aya. And we went, yeah, amazing. And Brian was like, this is daft. What are we going to do? Have two houses, 500 meters apart.
Yeah.
Let's sell our house. And your mum sells hers and we buy a house together and we'll make it work. And we asked mum, I remember being like, well, we've got to give her time to think about it. It's a bit much. She might not want to be, lots of grandparents don't feel like they want to be the, that be as they feel like they've brought up their children. And I think it was about 3.5 seconds. And mum's like, yes, I'm in. And so mum lives in our in kind of the ground floor of our house. My mum has an apartment and own front door, own kitchen and sitting room.
Perfect setup.
It's deadly.
Yeah.
Because we have wraparound care in that sense of, if you're an hour late, it's not the end of the world.
Yes.
And Aya has Granny. So now, to be fair, poor Granny, she is sometimes at 6 a.m. like, I really want to go see May. And I'm like, May does not do 6 a.m. May grandparents from 9 a.m.
Yeah.
until about 7 p.m. And that's May does these hours and we do not otherwise disturb May.
There.
But it's generational perspective that these are the good old days. In the midst of survival, which we're all in, and, all of us, no matter what you're doing, if you're stay-at-home mum, if you're working mum, wherever we sit in the perspective, we are in the survival years because these tiny little people need you. You are their primary person, and they'll stay tiny for years. But having mum reminds me that you don't know how long you have. You don't know how long health. I always think I was quite sick when I was little, and I always think it's the thing that has given, because I'm delusionally optimistic. I am really, really optimistic. Now, that is always challenged by the fact that the world is currently on fire. I'm pragmatic about lots of things, but I think about the idea of, if this is it, if this is what we have, if these are the moments, if this is, and remembering it might be, it's the half an hour pause. Mum is really good on all that stuff of, you can have a clean house or happy children. Pick one.
Yeah, not both.
Not both. Not a perfect house. Not happy kids. And there's days when you have to just clean the house because it's going to drive you insane. And there's, have I ever cleaned our windows? No, I have to say. I'm like, it's getting
Meet your sister, yeah.
Right? Can you see out them? And that's my test.
Barely.
I'm like, all right. I was like, okay, possibly this is the year. I should just I'm going to
get a cleaner.
Yeah, just do the bits. And we have a cleaner and I adore her. And I have a robot Hoover that I passionately.
Yes, sorry. I see your robot Hoover on Instagram. And
it is.
Every time I'm like, I need to get a robot
honestly,
Hoover.
It's like, whilst I'm 100% and Brian is amazing and we share the domestic load. I think probably actually that's the secret. They say the greatest impact on a woman's career is the man you marry.
Absolutely.
Or the woman you marry.
Absolutely. We say that again for the people in the back.
And it's just, but how grim is that?
I know, it is grim.
It's grim that, it doesn't determine his career. Like yours. A good wife and a good husband is an amazing thing. But it's an interesting one that it's such an impact, and having someone who holds the balance with you.
As a mum, the reality is we spend a lot of time in the car. Whether that's juggling work or the kids or a little bit of both, you need a car that makes life easier. The other Image mums and I recently test drove the Peugeot 3008 and 5008, and we were genuinely so impressed. They are really spacious. There is room for car seats and sports gears and buggies and wherever else you're having. And they've also got tons of really innovative tech. The 3008 SUV is the perfect combination of style and practicality, and the 5008 is so spacious it even has 7 seats if you need it. Whether you've got babies, toddlers or teens, Peugeot really have thought of everything. When life is busy and on the go, you need a car that keeps up, and Peugeot just gets it. We talk a lot about equality in the workplace, but we never talk about equality in the home and what that looks like. And I've spoken to you about this before, and we have similar home setups in that it really is equal in our homes.
And not equal every day. Not equal, but over the year.
Absolutely.
Over the month, over the next week for work. We've got a gorgeous event with Kildare Village and I'm going to stay in the hotel. And I said to Brian, I'm like, drop Aya to me. He hasn't had 24 hours alone for ages. I might pop her down to me. We'll have a gorgeous date in the hotel. I'll take her swimming. We'll have dinner. I'll go to bed at 8 p.m. with her.
Perfect.
And it'll be intense, but he'll get 24 hours. He's going to go to a gig with friends. He's going to wake up without a tiny person with him. And so it's over, balance is different for all of us.
Absolutely it is. Yeah. And in the day to day, I think it's important as well, in the little tasks. Like Rory does the laundry in our house, which has been a huge
Laundry
thing.
is outrageous.
Oh,
How many women still do the
so
laundry?
time consuming.
It's scandalous.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's the thing that I'm, that what they say, that the washing machine was one of the greatest tools in women's independence. It wasn't anything else, but it took us out of the domestic servitude that is laundry to have washing machines. I think that's relatively recently. It's the last 100 years.
Wild, yeah.
But what's terrifying is the backwards bit.
I know.
Like, you, honey, you trad wife if you want to, but what happens when he divorces you and leaves you for the younger model? Because that is absolutely the road they're setting themselves up for.
And you don't have anything in the bank or anything. Yeah,
you have 8 babies,
support yourself,
but nothing. And so it's not that having 8 babies is bad. It's not that being a traditional trad wife is bad. But it's our mothers vote very, very. The vote is only just coming to 100 years. The right to vote. I always do this. This is the one that always terrifies me. So the Irish women's movement started in the 70s, and they wrote the Women's Liberation Manifesto. And in 1972, your husband could go to London and without your, because divorce was legal, without your consent, divorce you in London without your consent or knowledge, get full custody of your children without your consent or knowledge, get full custody of your house, even if you had brought that house into the marriage without your consent or knowledge, get full custody of your bank accounts without your consent or knowledge, and come back to Ireland and put you on the side of the road and be sitting in your house with your children and your money.
And you can't do anything about
Nothing.
it.
No legal rights. 1972.
Not even 50 years ago.
Literally, like it's 50 something years, and you're going.
My maths.
No, I don't like. Yeah, but it feels like,
Yeah.
and rape within marriage was 90. Was it 91 or 96? But all these things that are very recent, and we ask why women haven't achieved equality. I'm like, well, our mothers. People always say, "Mum is so amazing," and she is incredible. But also all of our mums are, because they survived. Our mums and our grannies survived that era.
One of the things that always sticks that my granny said to me, and my granny loves my husband. Like, this is going to give the impression she doesn't. She does. But she said to me, whenever my granny sees me, she'll give me like €20, which is
still,
and sometimes more.
May we be those grannies? I want to be that outrageous granny that is still slipping the 20 quid.
She said to me just before I got married, she said, make sure that you always have an FU fund.
Yeah.
And the money she gives me, put it in the FU fund.
Isn't she?
You can say it to him and you can go off on your own. Yeah.
But they came from an era when,
you didn't have that. Yeah, they didn't have anything. Yeah. She also job shared before it was a thing. She had a friend who had 5 kids and she had 2 at the time. And the 2 of them were at home and they hadn't a penny.
Yeah.
And their husbands traveled a lot with work. And she said to her friend, look, I'm going to go get a job. You mind my 2 kids and I'll split the money with you. Because there was no such thing as crashes either at the time.
Oh my gosh.
And she split the money. And then a year later they swapped. And she went off and got a job. And the other one stayed at home and they split the money.
Isn't that amazing?
Amazing.
Isn't it? Like,
amazing.
And what they had to do to survive. I just think, like, mum, things that we take for granted now and things that still need to be, like maternity leave, paternity leave. We can't, you go, okay, isn't it amazing? We so want better maternity, but you've got to have paternity because dad has to be at home. He has to be at home in those early days. There's a huge physical piece for her. But that, there's so much still to be fixed.
And he wants to.
He wants to.
Yeah, he wants to.
And he should
want to.
Yeah. And moms, no matter what, that there should be a place. And the problem, I always think it's the daughter of an economist, opportunity cost. What are we missing in the world by not enabling people? I don't understand. We're in the middle of the school thing at the moment. So Aya will go to school for the first time. She's in Montessori at the moment, which we adore. She'll go to school in September.
Junior infants.
Junior infants.
Oh,
she's a baba.
It's a big moment.
It's huge.
Yeah.
But I think this idea, I was homeschooled. And I always like to point out that Ireland is doing my God, the Barks are doing no favours to homeschooling at the moment. I believe in evolution. I believe in the right to choose. It used to be, homeschooling, what a gorgeous, quirky thing to have done. Now it's like, actually, no, it's a religious fundamentalist piece. But I don't understand this idea of why we have 30 children and 1 teacher. Just make it 10 children and 1 teacher. You triple the cost, but the outcomes, you get all these little gorgeous people who we all learn in such different ways. We're all educated in such different ways. We value things in different ways.
Absolutely.
The poor teachers in schools, how the hell do they 25 to 30 tiny terrorists to manage and cajole. And so it's a really, that's a kind of our next adventure with her will be the adventure of school.
It's an exciting one.
Yeah, it's going to be really good fun. I'm really excited.
I want to talk about your mum, Rosita Sweetman. I feel like I hear choirs of angels sing when I say her name. She really is like,
you don't think it's a bra burning and a fist raised.
Also that. One of the founders of the Irish Women's Liberation Movement. And I want to know what it was like growing up with Rosita Sweetman as your mum. Were you aware of what she was doing?
I always think, difficult women. Mum is sort of the epitome of a difficult woman. And I just, the way you grow up, whatever you grow up with, you think is normal. And I always thought it was really normal that we went to all the protests, that our house was really, that everyone was welcome. I remember actually a really dear friend said to me, who's gay, he said, your childhood was so liberal, you're blind. And I thought it was such an interesting thing because I'd had such a liberal, such a kind childhood that I didn't recognize discrimination in the world because it had never occurred to me it existed. And it was amazing. And he still laughs about it. He's like, oh, wow, I was feeling saucy. And he was just really angry with me. And it was a really good thing to be told because I'd grown up really believing, and it was quite a shock coming out into the world as a young woman.
Yeah.
We've been brought up with this huge equality. I remember going into the bank and I had this huge contract with Topshop, and it was back when we had laser cards. Do you remember laser cards? Not debit cards, because of course it was an Irish solution to an Irish problem. We couldn't do anything sensible. And you couldn't buy online with a laser card. And so I needed a credit card. And I went into the bank to get one. I won't name the bank out of kindness to them. And the relationship manager sat me down. I was 22, had a thriving business with Topshop. And he said, would you not just use your boyfriend's? And I remember thinking, because my boyfriend, Brian, had a credit card through, because he was a student. So they literally were handing them out like confetti. It was Celtic Tiger era. Your dog could have gotten a credit card. But he was my dad's age and just couldn't see. And
why a girl would need.
Why girl, not a woman, a girl.
Not a woman, yeah.
And so mum, always just, I think what she grew up incredibly complicated family. Her family's a car crash. And then my dad ran away with my aunt. So I had that for the family drama.
Wow.
And had a long affair with her and then ran away with someone else. Which I always think is hysterical. I'm like, yeah, love of his life. But actually, and I have my gorgeous baby sister from his last marriage, which was an amazing gift. But mum had this extreme version of reality, where there should have been a family support, there wasn't, where she should have had her husband, he wasn't useful. So she has, but instead of that crushing her, she still cares. She still is so passionate about this idea that we need to make the world better, that it is not good enough, that this is not good enough. And I think may I hold that. She's 77 this year, and still, when I was born and it was COVID, we took her on her first protest when she was 9 months old to the National Maternity Hospital being given to the Catholic Church. And I have this wonderful picture of Aya holding mum, and Aya has a sign that says, "Get your rosaries off my ovaries." And I just are like, they're 2 generations, and Aya will hopefully grow up with this belief, and she's going to go out into the world and discover it's not true, that she is equal to anyone, that she can be anything she wants to be. She's going to go out and have that experience. But she'll hopefully grow up like I did, with this absolutely rock solid determination that, of course. And I think, that's, mum had a lot of privilege in terms of class and going out into the world, and that's 13 women in the women's movement. But mum always says their failure was that of the 13 women who founded the women's movement, so Nell McCafferty, Moore Woods, only 2 had kids. So which makes sense, because the others everyone who was having babies was literally tied to the kitchen sink. So 2 of the founders of the 13 had children. So it meant that they fought for equality as they understood it, which was, we are much more equal until we're about 35. So pre-babies, the world is relatively equal. We see it in school, we see it in uni, we see our daughters and our sons match for match. But where we don't see it is in the working world. And mum always says they didn't do it so that everyone could work 60 hours a week and the kids could be in crash. They did it because they hadn't experienced that yet, so they didn't know what it looked like. And then, mum went through divorce with dad, And then was a single mum, not having ever intended, they were together 20 years, never intended to be a single parent.
What age were you then?
I was about 5. So I was little and Luke was 2. So we were pretty tiny when it all kind of properly tumbled down. And so she saw a second layer of it that she hadn't seen, having fought really hard and had it. She traveled the world with Dad. They worked all over the place. She wrote a couple of best-selling books, had very strong equality and independence, brought a lot of money to the marriage, was the one who bought the house, But then when her marriage ended, suddenly a second layer of it. And in a way, I think, yeah, I love that she still cares. Sometimes I'm like, Mum, it's okay. You cannot fix the whole world. You do not need to care about the whole world. But I was on my way in here. I was calling her and chatting to her about the miscarriage in Georgia. That young woman, 24, a miscarriage at 19 weeks. And being charged, she's being charged with the unlawful disposal of a human body. For every woman who's had a miscarriage, does that mean, do you just, it's so graphic to go into it, but just like, is that every period is now a missed miscarriage? If you're a week late and you've had an early,
the line? Yeah.
Where's the line? And so I was talking to her about it and she was like, what? And she lives on the internet. I think that's amazing. It's kept her really, 10,000 followers on Instagram, and she gave up Twitter because obviously,
good woman, as did I.
Yeah. And we have a brand one, but I don't use it because it's, you've got to choose where and how. Awful. And so she is still so passionate. She
is, and I've spoken to her a few times on various topics, and she is so full of rage, and it's so beautiful and wonderful. I love it. It's brilliant. Yeah.
And love, I hope, and balance in that sense.
Sorry, she's not only full of rage.
No, she's filled with rage.
But for the injustices.
For the injustice and for the idea that equality and feminism is not about us versus them. It's about the idea, that our sons and daughters deserve a world where they can be held and loved, where they can hold and love each other, where they can, in all senses of the word, fulfill their potential.
Yes, where they don't feel like they have to choose between career and family, where they can go and feel like we are able to do both, and
that the boys can cry, and that they can be emotional, and that they can have all this space.
Let the boys cry.
I know, because it's really interesting, because my brother obviously grew up in this very female-centric household, my mum and I, and he's gorgeous. He's just such an amazing human being, and we adore his fiance. You know her,
Esme? I do.
One of Ireland's Emmy winners.
I know. Yes,
I think Ireland's
Esme.
only female Emmy winner, and so he has this incredible relationship that's really, and it's gorgeous seeing it like lived values.
Yeah.
You always imagine how do you raise feminist sons, and he's this gorgeous example of they both work in film, so an insane industry, but they have this really incredible, really equal relationship. And so seeing that lived in the world, I hope she always says we're her legacy. And that's not just her books and her writing, but also us, and that lived legacy of.
It's a pretty good legacy.
Well, it's hard, right? Because you're going to all the things, and legacy is an interesting one. Mm-hmm. So looping it back to that amazing group of women who I have as this board you can't afford. One of the very first exercises I did with them, which is a terrifying prospect, is write your own obituary. Big write. And I was maybe 30. But it's an incredible thing to have to do, because write your obituary and write the perfect day in your life at 65. And the goal with it is to take us out of today. What does legacy look like? What does impact look like? What do you actually want to do in the world? What are the choices you're going to make? As we've scaled and grown Chupi, it would have made loads of sense to offshore all the manufacturing. Pretty much everyone in Ireland does, all the jewellery brands. Most people are saying it's made in Ireland. What they really mean is that they've assembled it in Ireland. So they've done the final stage. They popped the diamond into the setting here. But most of the manufacturing is happening in Thailand, Myanmar, out in Asia, and then the assembly happens here. And it would have been a completely legitimate path to do for Chupi. And it's never one we've even looked at. Everything is made on Clarendon Street. It's made in Wicklow, Kildare. We've got incredible partners here that we get, guys with 50 years in the business. We've female goldsmith working on our team. We've, and I think those are my choices. Does it always mean it's you've got to balance, we say business, it's the triple bottom line, people, profit, planet.
Yes.
It's balancing all of those things.
Yes.
Image's ability to make an impact in the world, the motherloads. You could have started all sorts of, started a fashion podcast, very well paid, but instead let's impact and legacy.
Absolutely.
What
Yeah,
does that look like? And it's
absolutely.
different for all of us.
Yeah.
And figuring out what it is for you.
I'm going to go and sit down and do those 2
Now,
exercises.
glass of wine, give yourself a hug, blanket, you've got to prepare yourself for it. And it's a huge thing to do. I did it on Instagram actually the other day in a really lo-fi way. Because we've all the Chupi brand Instagram and TikTok. We're now on TikTok. I don't dance, but I do love TikTok. But I did it on my own because I've got, Chupi Sweetman, I've got founder one and a brand one. And I wrote, someone had shared it as this big trend. Imagine being 80 and then waking up at the age you are now. And all the things that right now are torturous. What did we have to do this morning? I as Elsa this morning. So yesterday she was a mermaid and today she was Elsa. And so we had to find the right shoes for Elsa. She had the dress for Elsa and then she needed a plait for Elsa. It wasn't quite long enough. And all of that was a blocker to me getting into work on time. Was also just, I'm going to look back on that, and even 5, we're in the age of magic right now because she's nearly 5. And it was amazing writing 80-year-old you's perspective. Like last night, the last thing I wanted to do in the entire world was move my body. I was like, I am going to sit on the couch and scroll on the internet. And Brian was, let's go for a run. And I was like, I don't want to. And I did bedtime. And then I was lying on the bed, putting her to bed. And I was like, the privilege of being able to move my body, of getting out and running. And I'm a terrible runner. I took it up a year ago. I'm a really bad, really slow, really sweaty runner, but I love it. And we ran and we just talked, and it was 15 minutes out of my day. That's a kind of 14-hour day, but I ran for 15 minutes. And
what a privilege.
Yeah, what
Absolutely.
a joy. And privilege is a word that's been weaponized to be about something over there, and they're so privileged. But taking it back and owning it, of going, this luck. I don't like luck. I find luck a bit tricky. I always think, I was very lucky when I got scouted into Topshop when I was a kid, but I had started my label at 16 and I had spent 300 Saturdays standing in the rain.
Yeah.
Before I got scouted. So 280 wet weekends standing in the pissing rain before Topshop came along and said hi. And all of those moments we think about as luck. There's an ability of work to get there. And so, but acknowledging I was privileged enough to be able to do that. I had a family that loved me and supported me and, stood in the rain with me many days.
Yeah. No, there's no such thing as luck. There's hard work. It's that overnight success thing that never really is.
We're 2 pieces in overnight success that took nearly a decade.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's still a roller coaster. And acknowledging luck is gorgeous and magical, but just today, what can you do to make today worth living?
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. I'd love to know what your mum's thoughts are on, you kind of touched on it already, but on the world today. I mean, when we're talking about feminism, I feel like, unfortunately, you have to also talk about misogyny and violence against women and the horrible situations that we're seeing play out in the media so regularly. I mean, does your mum think about the fight that she did and how far we've come? And then does she feel like we're starting to slip backwards? Do you feel like we're starting to slip backwards?
I think the huge, you talk to Mum and Alva Smith, who's chair of Women's Aid, and obviously, just the pair of them get them going, and they're very fierce together. And you have Mum and Alva, and you think about everything they went through. And Women's Aid says it's 1 in 4 women are a victim of violence. 1 in 4. You just think about that statistic. I think for Mum, and as a survivor herself of domestic violence, I guess it depends on the day you catch her on. Probably like all of us, she's optimistic that the world is better, that there is so much more opportunity for our sons and daughters, that the world has gotten so much better, that, all of the things I built a business on the shoulders of the work they did. I wouldn't have, Mum, there was no question that Mum could have built a business, at her age. Yeah. And I have gotten to build this business, to live this life too, because of the work they did. But there are also days where she's just heartbroken.
Yeah.
Particularly what's happening in both Palestine and the US, the 2 extremes of it, where you're looking at, a genocide, and you're looking at a first world country that is somehow reenacting The Handmaid's Tale. And, you look at the prosecution of that poor girl in Georgia, you're looking at the rollbacks, and, it was always said in Ireland that you could always get an abortion. You just had to be from a certain class. You had to be, you you had to be able to go to, not naming any of the hospitals and clinics, but we all knew, you know, everyone knew it wasn't an abortion, it was a D&C.
Yeah.
You know, it was an ectopic, it was a something else. And so the idea that you always think of that thing, you don't ban abortion, you ban safe abortion. You know, you don't ban women from the workplace, you don't ban them at certain levels, you just ban the safe version of all of that. And if we don't make it safe, because there's, in loads of ways, we have so many freedoms, but I don't run in the winter.
Yeah.
I don't.
Dark.
I took up running last year with this huge, oh my God, I love this. It's and I run away from my family and my responsibilities. Literally, I put in my headphones, I listen to music or a podcast, and I run away from my house. And I'm like, aha, world. And then the darkness settled in October, November. And I just stopped going out because I had one kind of slightly, every woman has a story. You know, we all have a story a year, a story a month. And I had one slightly hazy experience, and I just thought, I'm actually not going to risk it. And I live in a really busy part of the city and really well lit streets. But I just, all it takes is one. And, you know, we've all had the incident being in a taxi. We've all had the incident. And I just think that, that breaks Mum's heart. She's still optimistic though. So I get my optimism from her, which is, it's only going to get better if we believe it's going to get better.
Yeah.
If we let them win, you know, and if we surrender. And, you know, she was telling me, Andrew Tate, there's some court case that's just landing out in the UK. He put a gun in a woman's mouth. If you look at Conor McGregor, the idea that someone who's been convicted of multiple crimes and was found guilty in civil court is going to save Ireland. So let me get this straight. The white man who raped someone is going to save me from the brown men who have done nothing. And there's the rising tide not only of violence against women, but of racism running alongside it. I always think, you know, you don't get to be Irish and racist. We've exported people all over the world. I don't care if people are economic migrants or political refugees, or they're choosing to come here, and it's incredible. You know, we're getting people to come here who want to start lives. And so I think Mum, you know, catch her on the day. General tone is optimism for sure, but it's hard. Yeah, isn't it, for all of us?
Yeah, it's a complicated, difficult world at the moment. How does that feel, raising a daughter in that?
You know, it's funny. I didn't think, and we found out really early IVF, so we found out at 9 weeks that she was a girl. And I wanted to know, did you find out?
No.
Did you not?
No. Surprise both times.
Jesus, I thought there was enough jazz hands going on. I needed to know. I needed to know as much as possible, because I needed to know who she was.
Yeah,
and
I get that.
Not that, you know, I could have got a little boy who'd love sequins and a girl who'd love tracksuits. So there's no definition of it, of gender. But I needed to just understand her a little bit more. But I remember realizing, probably at about kind of 3 or 4 months, as it became more real, as the pregnancy became more real, and it felt like she was going to make it into the world, that she was going to experience all the discrimination I had. And that was a shock. And I think that's partly what keeps Mum going so actively. We always joke, we're always teasing her. Brian is like, I'll ban you off the internet. You know, like we keep saying we're going to impose a curfew on her. So that from 9 p.m. to kind of 9 a.m. she has no access to the internet, so she can't read. And you know, she's got this incredible community of people all over the world. And so many of her generation have been weaponized against trans women and men. And it's like, I'm like, guys, the united common enemy here is the grey man in the grey suit. We don't need to worry about trans women or trans men. It's the grey man in the grey suit. All, you know, good men and good women, no matter where you sit or where you came from. The enemy is over there. We're all united against, it's basically Donald Trump. All of us. You know, he's the personification of it. Conor McGregor, you know, wherever you're going. And they could have made a difference in the world.
Yeah.
You know, they could have added value. They could have protected people. They could have, and they chose a very, very different path. And so I think Mum keeps going, thinking about us and what we've, you know, my brother and I, and the things that we've been through, but also her, our girl, you know, as she is out in the world and the discrimination she's going to face that she has no idea. She started a girl gang in school.
Good girl.
Because there was a bit of a thing of the boy gang was there was kind of a bit of an interaction with the boy gang, the boys, and how the boys were behaving. And so we were away one weekend a few weeks ago, and she said, so I've left Lola in charge of the girl gang. And I was like, I what? She's like, yeah, Lola's in charge of the girl gang. And I was like, what does Lola have to do? And she said, well, Lola is going to make sure that the boys, she said, if the boys do anything, she's going to make sure they attack back. They're 4. This is Montessori. And I've got an amazing Montessori run by an incredible woman. And she said, yeah, actually, it's worked really well. The girls. And I asked her, so are you the leader of the girl gang? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, why are you the leader? She was like, I'm the biggest. And another boy is the leader of the boy gang. She's like, yeah. And the girl gang and the boy gang are now getting on famously because basically they've just, the girls got all feisty. And I was laughing, going, in an ideal world, they would all just get along perfectly. But in a funny way, it was that, yeah, she decided she was like going to be the leader of the girl gang. There was going to be a gang. She appointed a deputy when she was out of office. Like, oh my God.
She is her mother's daughter.
Like, honestly,
you
like,
realize that?
Yeah, but like that's, that is generations of difficult women. Because actually, just literally generations, because my granny, who was not an angel by any means and not always a good human being, but born in 1914. And so during my great grandfather had served in the First World War. Her dad had served in First World War. Her brother grandfather was a doctor. Her dad was a doctor. Her brother was a doctor. She wanted to be a doctor because, that's the family history and the family story. And she wasn't allowed. And she wanted then to go, she wanted to go serve in, go contribute, be part of the emergency. Would have been it should have been early 20s when it was happening. And she wanted to go be part of it. And she went up, wanted to go, drove ambulances up north. That's what she really wanted to do during it all. And at 21, when she was told she couldn't be a doctor and couldn't be a nurse because ladies didn't work. So it was a huge class thing of just, you didn't, she was from a class that just, there was no question of employment, just was not allowed. And she was given a car and a pony, just on her 21st birthday, here's your horse and your car. And, a car in that, 1935, you can imagine. But she cut her hair off.
Wow.
So she'd long blonde hair down to her waist, and she got her portrait painted when she was 21, which was the family tradition. By the time it came to me, it was like a picture on Kodiak, like a quick snap on the disposable camera. But for her, it had her portrait painted, and she cut her beautiful blonde hair down to her chin, and that was because that was the only bodily autonomy she had. She had control over her hair, and that was that. She couldn't go to university, couldn't go and be, and she would have been a phenomenal doctor. She was cold and it would have made an amazing doctor. It would have suited her really well, but instead she got married to a lovely man, to my grandfather, and had 8 babies that would she have wanted in any world to have had 8 babies. And I think so, a very difficult woman who couldn't in any way exercise her autonomy had my mum, who has done nothing but fight. And then in my own, I always think business is a force for good. We want to change the world, and part of it is power and money.
Yeah.
It's got to be in our hands, not just theirs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And by theirs, I don't mean the incredible men in the world. I mean in the Trumps and the McGregors of the world.
Is that what you hope Aya takes from you watching you navigate the world?
I hope she takes an appetite for joy. I hope she takes an absolute burning passion for finding the joy in the world, for force for good, for choosing the right things, for making the right choice, even if it's the hard choice of choosing the right thing to do at the right time and finding the joy in it. We have this incredible, Brian and I, so because we were babies, our friends have grown up together, our gang, and so we have this whole logical family of this gorgeous group of people. And so our friends have sort of all married each other and fallen in love, and we've built friendships. This idea of your friends and their friends, why would you, when you can make it one big, messy, complicated family? And so her little besties, lots of our friends had complicated journeys to their families too, but she's got this little gang of friends that are all around. And I hope joy that she will take from everything we have done and find her joy in the world and find a way to bring joy into the world, whatever she chooses to do.
And that she's also a difficult woman.
Oh my, that is, so she is already, we say that to each other, Brian and I, all the time, like, yes, we're raising a brilliant, strong, independent woman. We just have to survive. We just have to survive the next 20 years until she appreciates us. And then by 25, hopefully she'll understand. But yeah, no, may she be a difficult woman.
Chupi Sweetman, thank you so much
pleasure,
for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode, you might also like to log on to image.ie and visit our Motherload hub, where there is lots more articles and information. And you may also like to sign up to our newsletter there, where you will hear about our events and our podcast episodes before they go live. Thank you, as always, to the incredible brands that make the Motherload possible. The Motherload is powered by Peugeot and sponsored by It's for Women, Avoca, and Liffey Valley. Thank you to you for listening or watching this episode. Please, if you could take a moment to rate, review, subscribe, or share with a friend, we would so appreciate it. I will talk to you next week. Until then, mind yourself, lean on your village, and remember, you are not on your own.